Hi, everybody. So in this video, we're going to take a look at Module 50. Now, I'll tell you first off that the Check Your Understandings in Module 50 are a little bit longer, but they're really useful for understanding efficiency and the idea of producer and consumer surplus and how it can change. So buckle up a little bit here. All right, number one says, using the tables in Check Your Understanding 49, find the equilibrium price and quantity for peppers. What's the total surplus in the market and who receives it? So we're going to say like quantity and price, and so we'll do that, and then it's saying like total surplus and where does it come from. And so let's take a look at Module 49 here a little bit. We have these two sets of data here that were constructed, and what we need to do is look at where do the quantity demandeds equal each other, and it probably would have been easier if I did this next to each other, but I didn't realize these would be on here. You have to look where the quantity demandeds are equal at the same price, right? So kind of look in our list here and we see like, okay, and usually it's in the middle. 5 quantity demanded is at 50 cents. 5 quantity supplied is 50 cents. And so you can see here that like if we had any other combo, you wouldn't see it, right? So quantity demanded 4 at 60 cents and quantity supplied for 40 cents, so that's a disequilibrium. So we're looking for where the quantity demanded is the same, and so at the same price. And we said, what was that? Oh, I flipped those. It's 5 at 50 cents. So now, total surplus. Now this one, there's a couple of ways to do it, but the simplest way is to think about like, okay, with their surpluses, right, what's their minimum willingnesses to do these with? And for each one of these, like how much would they gain if it were 50 cents? So let's take a look here in thinking about the easier way, just to think here, would actually be to do this maybe graphically. Quantity, price, demand, and supply. And we know that like that's 50. So let's look to see, and we know that's 5. What's this value? And what's that value, so that we can figure out the size of these triangles. So at what price does quantity demanded hit 0? Well, quantity demanded hits 0 at $1, right? At $1, $1. And at what price does quantity supplied hit 0? It's at 0. Okay, and that's also at 0. So we can actually just say, you know, the height of this triangle is 0.5 times 5 divided by 2. And so the total surplus, right, because these are the same amount, is thinking about like, well, this is the height. Well, I'll go ahead and solve these for you. Right? Producer surplus is equal to the height of the triangle, 0.5 times the base, 5 divided by 2. So that's 0.25 divided by 2 is 0.125. Now, for up here, for the top half, it's going to be the same size. So we just basically say consumer surplus is also 0.125. And so total surplus, which is originally what I had written way up here, total surplus is equal to 0.25. So that's how we get total surplus. Now, number 2, I'm going to get rid of this sheet. Number 2 says consider the market for butter. Now, this problem also might rely on us graphing it a little bit easier. And the government imposes a tax of 30 cents, price paid post-tax, what's the price received post-tax, quantity of butter sold, blah, 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 blah. And it says actually show this on the figure. So it is easier if we just draw it out. Quantity, price, and it's like, oh, these are really tough. Okay. So we know that you've got like this is your demand curve, this is your supply curve, and it's equilibrium at $1 and at 10. Now, the thing is, we're going to shift this supply curve up by 30 cents, right? So that's S tax. And now this is where things are going to get a little bit tricky with this. What we're basically going to look for is a point here to a point here that we know are 30 cents apart that are something less than 10. So if we kind of look on our tiny little picture here, Okay, well, it looks like the 8 here is not right, and it looks like maybe the ninth one goes to $1.20 and goes to 90. So if we were at 9, this one's at 90 cents, this one's at $1.20. And so the vertical distance is 30 cents, and we were at a quantity less than 10, and the only ones where we even have points available are 8 and 9, and 8's too big. The wedge between the two is too big, so we know they're going to go to 9. Now, it says the price paid by the consumers post-tax. Well, that's the price paid by the consumers is $1.20 because that's the price on the demand curve after the tax is imposed. For the second question, it says, what's the price received by the sellers? Well, they don't keep the full $1.20. They only keep 90 cents. Right? Why do they only keep 90? Well, it's because there's 30 cents is the tax. Number 3 says, what's the quantity of butter sold? Well, after the tax, we've already established they have 9. Let's take a look. Number 4, what's the incidence of the tax allocated? In other words, who has to pay more of the tax? Well, of the 30 cents, now I drew it where they're equal. I mean, you can't really tell, but if you notice, right, the total here is 30, but who's paying the bigger portion of it? Well, this is 0.2 and that's 0.1. And so this area is larger. It's a little harder to see again on mine, but that's the consumer surplus that's going towards the tax, right? And thinking about it, like the price used to be $1, it went to $1.20. So did they bear equally? No, the buyer paid a higher price. So the buyers paid more. They paid more. And we can actually say like 0.2 is bigger than 0.1. All right, now number 3, and so I told you these were a little bit of a doozy, but they're good. They're good practice. The accompanying table shows 5 consumers' willingness to pay for a can of soda. Each consumer buys at least one. Producer's cost, blah, 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 blah. It says the government asks your advice about the effects of a 40-cent tax on diet soda. And then it says all these other related questions. Now, this is another one where it might actually be easier to draw a quick little graph to do it. You can do it just looking at them. This is really similar to a practice problem we did on taxes as well. But I'm going to go ahead and draw a quick little graph because I think that makes these way easier to do. So you have a demand curve, and you have a supply curve. Now, the first thing to know is, like, without the excise tax, what's the price and quantity? Well, we're going to do the same thing we did previously. We're going to look for where do the quantities equal each other at the same price. Now, if that's hard to understand from these, think about, like, well, you've got a table right here, and pick basically if the price were 40 cents or if the price were 60 cents, figure out, are the quantities the same? So let's say, what about 50 cents, right? At 50 cents, how many consumers are going to buy a can of soda? Well, you have 3. You have Ella. Ella's not willing to because she's only willing to pay 30 cents. It's 50 cents. So Dagmar is also out. Chizuko is in. Bernice is in, and Anna is in. So you have 3 that you're demanding at 50 cents. At 50 cents, how many are produced? Well, Zhang, Eve, Xavier, Walter, and Vern, all 5. So those are not the same quantities. So there are too many being produced at 50 cents. So it's going to be a price lower than 50 cents. So let's try 40. At 40 cents, Dagmar now purchases a can of soda. So now we have 4 that are going to be quantity demanded. And how many are supplied? Well, Vern doesn't want to produce if it's only 40 cents. But Walter still produces, Xavier, Eve, and Zhang still produce. So now we still have 4. And ta-da, 40 cents is the correct price. And at that price, 4 are bought and sold. So we can actually label this on our graph and say 4 and 40. And so this is A, 4 and 40 cents. And then it says B, the excise tax raises the price to 60 cents and lowers the price received by producers to 20 cents. With the tax, what's the quantity of soda sold? So in this one, right, we know it's going to be S tax, and it's asking us for what's this quantity. And it actually gives us that it's 20 cents is how much the sellers get to keep, and it raises the price to 60. Well, if the price is now 60 for the consumers, then only Anna and Bernice are willing to pay for it. And so we'd say QD is equal to 2. And if the price they get to keep is only 20 cents, then only Eve and Zhang are willing to produce and not Xavier and Walter. And so we would say that's also 2. And so that the correct answer being 2, right? Without these excise tax, how much individual consumer surplus does each of the consumers gain? How much individual consumer surplus does each consumer gain with the tax? And how much total surplus, consumer surplus, is lost as a result of the tax? Okay, so the first thing, right, we're going to figure out, well, the price was 40 cents originally, which means there were 4 in terms of the buyers. So I'm going to do this one over here, right? And we say Anna's consumer surplus was her 70 cents she was willing to pay minus the price, which was, so then 30, because the price was 40. Bernice, her consumer surplus, 70 cents minus 60 is 0.1. And Shizuko is, her consumer surplus is 0.7 minus 0.5. I think I did this out of order. Oh my goodness. Anna's consumer surplus. Oh my gosh, I totally did these out of order. I'm terrible. No, wait a minute. I think I was doing this, I had a brain fart, a total brain fart. So the first one was right. The second one, I was getting overexcited. Oh my goodness. 0.7 minus 0.4 equals 0.3. For B, her consumer surplus is what she's willing to pay. I should slow down. 0.6 minus what she paid, 0.4, 0.2. For C, her consumer surplus is what she was willing to pay, which is 50 cents, minus 0.4 is 0.1. And then for D, her consumer surplus, she was willing to pay 40, she did pay 40, so she got 0. Now, it says, how much do they gain with the tax? Well, we know that C and D are not going to be, they're not going to be transacting because they're not willing to pay 60 cents, which is the price after the tax. And so we would say for A, it's 70 minus 60, so that's 0.1. And for B, it's, she was willing to pay 60, and so after the tax, she pays 60, and so she gets nothing. And so the total surplus, right, for her, she changed to 0.3 to 0.1. She changed from 0.2 to 0. She was out. So we went from 0.6 to 0.1. So we lost 50 cents. Now we're going to do it with the producers. And so I told you it's a little bit of a doozy, but we'll get there, right? So D, for the producers, right, we know that it's basically the same question. So I'm going to rewrite these and say Z, Y, X, and W. And we're going to say their producer surplus is the price they received minus their cost of producing it. And beforehand, right, the price they received is 40 cents. So the price they received is 40 cents minus their cost. And so Z's cost is 10 cents. So Z gets 30. Block that off a little bit. Y's cost is 20 cents. So that's 0.2. X's is 0.3. And, oops, minus 0.4 because Walter's cost is 40 cents. And so he gets no producer surplus, but he transacts. Now, we know that the price that the producers receive goes to 20 cents. So we know that Xavier and Walter are out, right? They're not going to produce. But now we'd say they only get to keep 20 cents. So 20 cents minus 0.1 means now Zhang is at 0.1 because 0.2 minus 0.1. For Y, the cost is 20 cents and they're only getting 20 cents, so they get nothing. And so they go from 0.6 to 0.1 as well, which means they also lost 50 cents in total. Okay? And then E, how much does the government get from this tax? Okay, so we'll do E. And I know I'm doing these totally out of order, but think about, well, at E, how many are bought and sold? We established that they buy and sell 2, that's here. And so 2 is the quantity times the tax equals the tax revenue. And so the tax is 40 cents. And so we'd say they generate 80 cents of tax revenue. And then it says, what's the deadweight loss from the imposition of this tax? And so we're going to find the area of these 2 triangles, right? And so the base is 2, the height is 2. And we can observe that actually the 2 triangles are identical, so we don't have to divide by 2 for each of those. So for part F, we'd say the base is 2 times the height, base times height, and the height of this triangle is 2. And we're not going to 0.2 because it's 0.6 to 0.4. We're not going to divide by 2 because there are 2 of these triangles that are exactly the same. And so we'd say 40 cents of deadweight loss. Okay, now multiple choice. I told you it was a doozy. I'm so sorry. I'm going to flip that page over. We're going to do this on the back. This is an intense one. That's a market equilibrium in a competitive market. Which of the following is true? Consumer, producer, or total surplus is maximized. Now, if you did some of the practice problems, you would recognize that you actually, in a competitive market, don't always maximize the total consumer surplus or the total producer, but you do maximize the two numbers combined. So the correct answer for the multiple choice number 1 is the third only, which is C. Number 2, when a competitive market's in equilibrium, total surplus can be increased by, well, just to be clear, you can't increase total surplus if the market is in equilibrium and it's competitive. And so reallocating, no, changing quantity, no. So none of the above. E. Number 3, which of the following is true regarding equity and efficiency? And equity is the idea of fairness, right? The allocation in terms of what's the right thing to do, the fair or just thing to do. Competitive markets ensure both equity and efficiency? No, because they may not be fair, but they are really efficient. There's often a trade-off between equity and efficiency. That is true, so it's probably B. Competitive markets lead to neither equity nor efficiency. That's not true. They're usually very efficient when they're competitive. And D, there's generally agreement about the level of equity. There is absolutely not agreement about that. And so we would say B is the correct answer here. Number 4, an excise tax imposed on sellers will result in which of the following? So we know that it shifts the supply curve up. So 1 is true, 2 is not going to be true. And in 99 times out of 100, there is going to be deadweight loss, which is what we saw in those practice problems. So I'm going to say 1 and 3 only. There is an argument to be made that 1 only is the only correct answer. And so, your mileage may vary with that a little bit. Number 5, an excise tax will be paid mainly by producers. Remember that the more elastic one escapes the tax. So that's what we remember. Will be paid by the producers when the price elasticity of supply is low and the price elasticity of demand is high. So thinking about like the more elastic one escapes it. And so the A and B answers are totally off. It's only going to be C or D. And so the correct answer here is C, because elastic demand, they escape the tax. Okay, we're going to wrap this one up with a little bow and run away from this one. Free response number 2, draw correctly labeled graph of a competitive market in equilibrium. All right. E, Q, demand, supply. And then it says equilibrium price quantity without the tax, labeled P, E, and QE. QE, PE. And then it says quantity, and by the way, it says there is a tax imposed on consumers. Now this is something that I didn't show you how to do in the lecture notes. If it's imposed on consumers, it just reduces the consumer's willingness to pay. That's weird, right? And so I will do that here to show you what that looks like. But if you wanted to, you could flip this problem around and just shift up the supply curve by costs. That would be fine as well. But I'm going to show it as they tell you to. So it's D tax. And so it's going to reduce their tax. It's going to reduce their demand by the vertical amount of the tax. It's goofy, but this is how they graph them. Quantity in the market post-tax is QT. Here, QT. QT. The price paid by the consumers is PC. So that's going to be the price is the original price paid is going to be up here, PC. And this is why I don't like this. It's weird. The price received by the producers is down here. So if you think about, and that's supposed to be PP. The tax revenue generated by it's this tax revenue box. And I know that you're supposed to label it, but it's like tax revenue. And then deadweight loss is a shade a different direction. That's deadweight loss. So it ends up looking basically the same. If I'm gonna go ahead and redraw it showing the supply curve at this point, but if you're good, you can turn off the video and move on. But this is what it would look like if we shifted the other one. So you have S tax, and so the quantity still goes to QT from QE, and the price that's paid is up here by the consumers, they pay that, and the price the sellers get to keep is down here, and it's the same area, right? It's just a different shifting curve that ends up being the same points on these curves. It's just the demand curve shifts because they said it's imposed on consumers. All right. I know this was a long one. You stuck in it. Good job. Bye now.